right, welcome back everybody for another deep dive. Today we are going to be tackling an audio clip, and let me tell you,
Oh boy.
this one's a doozy. It's called Ancient Knowledge Part 5 dot Energy, comma Coral Castle, comma Tablet of Shamash.mp3. That's the full title.
Wow, they really went for it with that title, huh?
Yeah, they did, and it's packed with some pretty wild theories.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
We're talking ancient knowledge, mysterious structures, and yeah, you guessed it, some good old-fashioned conspiracies.
All right, well let's dive in then. What's the main focus of this audio clip?
So this clip, it's really centered around the Coral Castle in Florida. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, the Coral Castle. It was built by Edward Leedskalnin.
That's right. And the source really plays up his whole idea that Leedskalnin claimed to know the secrets of the pyramid builders.
Oh, so we're going full ancient mysteries here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And they really emphasize the fact that nobody has been able to figure out how he moved these massive coral blocks, and we're talking huge, huge blocks here.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen pictures. It's pretty mind-boggling how he managed to do that with just basic tools, supposedly.
Right. And that's where things start to get even more interesting for me. So both the Coral Castle and the pyramids are primarily made from materials containing calcium carbonate.
Okay.
In fact, the source states that they are, quote, in composition absolutely identical, unquote.
Huh. So they're saying the materials are basically the same.
Exactly. And that's the whole crux of their argument. They're like, well, if the materials are the same, could this shared material be the key to understanding both Leedskalnin's methods and the secrets of the pyramids?
That's a pretty big leap, don't you think? I mean, just because they're made of similar materials doesn't mean they were built using the same techniques.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
I know. But that's what makes this so fascinating. They keep mentioning this hexagonal lattice.
Hexagonal lattice.
Yeah, I'm assuming it has something to do with the crystalline structure of calcium carbonate. I don't
Yeah.
know, I'm not a scientist.
Well, a hexagonal lattice refers to the arrangement of atoms in a repeating hexagonal pattern. You can think of it like a honeycomb.
Oh, okay, like a honeycomb.
Right. Now, while some materials with this structure can have some interesting properties, like increased strength or unique electrical conductivity, there's no scientific evidence that a hexagonal lattice would let you, defy gravity and move massive stones with ease.
Okay, so that's a no on the magic crystal theory.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But hey, who knows? Maybe Leedskalnin figured something out that we haven't rediscovered yet.
I mean, that would be pretty amazing if he did. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, but before we get too deep into the science of it all, this source takes a bit of a hard left turn.
Oh boy, where are we going now?
Buckle up, because we're heading straight into conspiracy land.
All right, hit me.
They jump to this seemingly unrelated topic, Saturn's hexagon. Ever heard of it?
Saturn's hexagon. Yeah, it's that weird six-sided jet stream around Saturn's North Pole, right? Pretty wild looking.
See, that's what I thought. But this source calls it bizarre and never seen in the universe before, which, I mean, come on.
A little dramatic, don't you think?
Yeah, just a tad. But it gets wilder. They start connecting Hurricane Sandy, a story about a puppy being killed in Iraq, and they even throw in the Greek god of war Ares for good measure.
Woo! Okay, hold on. That's a lot to unpack.
And then, get this, they quote President Bush asking, does the angel in the whirlwind still direct the storm? And they're trying to spin it as evidence of some kind of orchestrated attack.
Oh boy. Okay, so we've gone from ancient mysteries to full-blown conspiracy theories.
Right. And to top it all off, they try to link earthquakes and Hurricane Sandy.
So they're saying there's like a secret connection between all these random events.
That's what they're suggesting. So tell me, is there any scientific basis for this, or are you just grasping at straws here?
I think it's important to approach these kinds of claims with a healthy dose of skepticism. While it's natural to want to find explanations for things, sometimes it's just random chance,
So like seeing shapes in the clouds.
Exactly. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
Okay, that's fair. But I have to admit, I'm still kind of drawn to these wilder theories. They're just so intriguing.
I get it. They're definitely attention-grabbing. But we have to be careful not to get too carried away,
So how do we strike that balance between being open-minded and not getting totally lost in conspiracy land?
Well, I think it's all about critical thinking.
Yeah.
We need to look at the evidence, or in this case, the lack of evidence, and not just jump to conclusions based on speculation and conjecture.
So we need to put on our skeptic hats and really examine these claims before we go believing everything we hear.
Exactly. We can't just accept things at face value. We have to be willing to question things, even if it makes us uncomfortable.
I like that. Be willing to question things. Okay, so let's apply that to this audio clip. We've obviously got some pretty far out stuff here. But what can our listeners actually take away from this?
Well, I think the most important thing is to be aware of the power of belief and how easily we can be swayed by a compelling narrative, even if it's not supported by facts.
So it's a good reminder to be critical of the information we consume and to always look for evidence before we form an opinion.
Precisely. We need to be discerning consumers of information, especially in this day and age where everyone have a platform and an opinion.
All right, so maybe we need to pump the brakes on this conspiracy train for a second and get back to the Coral Castle.
Sounds like a plan.
I'm still stuck on those claims about lead scalanin and the pyramids. I mean, could there be a scientific explanation for how he did it, or is it all just smoke and mirrors?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The source definitely tries to draw a connection between the materials, but they don't really offer any concrete explanation for how lead scalanin actually moved those massive blocks. It's all very, he had the secrets, but without the how.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They keep talking about this hexagonal lattice, but they never really explain what makes it so special.
Right, it's like they're hinting at some kind of hidden knowledge, but they never actually reveal what it is.
So what's the deal with this hexagonal lattice anyway? Is it really as mysterious as they make it sound?
Well, like I said before, a hexagonal lattice is just a particular arrangement of atoms. It's not some magical force field or anything.
So just because the Coral Castle and the pyramids share a common material, it doesn't mean they automatically share the same unusual properties.
Exactly. You can't just assume a causal link just because two things have something in common. For example, diamonds and graphite are both made entirely of carbon, but they have vastly different properties. One's the hardest known natural material, and the other is soft enough to use in pencils. The arrangement of atoms makes all the difference.
That's a really good point. So where does that leave us with lead scalanin? Are we saying his claims are completely bogus, that he didn't actually have some secret ancient technique?
Not necessarily. Just because we don't have a scientific explanation right now doesn't mean one doesn't exist. We're still learning new things all the time. It's possible lead scalanin stumbled upon a technique or method that we haven't rediscovered yet. Maybe it was an ingenious use of levers and fulcrums, or perhaps he had a deep understanding of natural forces that we've lost over time. But until we have more concrete evidence, his methods will likely remain a subject of speculation and debate.
So the mystery continues.
Indeed it does.
I have to admit, though, I'm still drawn to those wilder theories. Are we just dismissing them outright? Or could there be something more to them? What about that quote from President Bush, does the angel in the whirlwind still direct the storm? I mean, that's pretty loaded, right?
It's certainly a dramatic quote, and it's understandable why the source might try to connect it to some kind of conspiracy. But we have to remember that context is everything President Bush said. Those words in a speech after Hurricane Katrina, a devastating natural disaster. He was speaking about faith and resilience in the face of tragedy. To interpret it as evidence of an orchestrated attack is a huge leap in logic.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's easy to get swept up in the drama and see patterns where none exist.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be critical thinkers. We need to carefully examine the evidence or lack thereof before jumping to conclusions. Just because two events happen in close proximity doesn't mean they're causally related. We have to look for evidence beyond mere coincidence.
It's like you always say, correlation doesn't equal causation. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, right?
Precisely. And in a world overflowing with information, it's more important than ever to be discerning consumers of that information. We can't just accept everything we hear at face value. We need to be willing to question assumptions, seek out reliable sources, and consider multiple perspectives.
So how do we apply this to the source we're discussing today? This audio clip obviously goes pretty far down the rabbit hole, but what can our listeners take away from this? Should we just ignore anything that sounds even remotely like a conspiracy theory?
I wouldn't say that curiosity is a good thing. It's what drives us to learn and explore. But it's important to temper that curiosity with a healthy dose of skepticism. Don't be afraid to ask questions and challenge the status quo, but do so with a grounded understanding of the facts.
So it's all about finding that balance between open-mindedness and critical thinking, right? Not shutting down new ideas, but not blindly accepting them either.
Exactly. And this deep dive has been a great example of that. We've explored some fascinating theories, but we've also highlighted the importance of looking beyond the surface and examining the evidence.
And sometimes the evidence just isn't there. But hey, even when we debunk a theory, we're still learning something valuable, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every deep dive, whether it confirms or challenges our beliefs, expands our understanding of the world and how we process information.
Well said. So, what does this all mean for our listeners? What are the key takeaways you hope they'll walk away with?
I think for me, the biggest thing is just realizing how powerful critical thinking is. It's so easy to get caught up in a good story,
Yeah.
especially when it's like feeding our need to understand
Yeah,
things,
totally. It's like we're wired to look for patterns and explanations, even if they're not really there.
right? But we kind of owe it to ourselves to dig a little deeper, don't you think? Like question what we're hearing and really look at the evidence before we just jump on board with any idea.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just about avoiding all the crazy conspiracy stuff either.
Yeah.
Critical thinking is important for everything, Making decisions, solving problems, navigating this whole crazy world we live in.
It's like that whole thing they say, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If someone's going to come out and say they know the secrets of the pyramids or they can predict earthquakes based on where the planets are, we should probably expect some pretty solid proof to back that up.
Yeah.
Exactly. The burden of proof is on the person making the claim. It's not our job to disprove them. It's their job to convince us with evidence.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up this deep dive into this audio clip, what's the most important message for our listeners? What do you really hope they'll take away from this conversation?
I think the key takeaway is to be careful about the information you're taking in. Don't be afraid to question things, even if it's from a source you usually trust. Look for evidence, consider different perspectives, and be open to changing your mind if the facts lead you in a different direction.
That's so important. It's easy to just look for stuff that already fits with what we believe. But if we want to really grow and learn, we got to be willing to challenge our own beliefs and listen to other points of view.
Exactly. And, it's okay to say, I don't know.
Mm.
There's no shame in admitting you don't have all the answers.
Hmm.
In fact, realizing you don't know everything can be a really powerful way to learn and discover new things.
That's a great point. I love that. Embracing the unknown. All right, so to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep those minds working. The world is full of crazy mysteries, and learning is a journey that never ends.
And remember, as you're exploring all that information out there, keep your critical thinking skills sharp, and you'll always find your way back to the truth.
Well said. Until next time, happy deep diving, everybody. Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me from all this is that we really shouldn't underestimate the power of critical thinking. It's so easy to just get swept up in a good story.
Yeah, I agree. It's like we're wired to look for patterns and try to make sense of things, even when maybe there isn't a pattern or a clear answer.
Exactly. And it's not just about like avoiding all the conspiracy theories and stuff. It's about making better decisions in all parts of our lives.
Right.
Like using those critical thinking skills to solve problems and navigate, this crazy world.
Absolutely. And, a big part of that is being able to evaluate information and figure out what's reliable and what's not, especially these days when there's so much information coming at us from all directions.
Right. It's like that saying, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If
Exactly.
someone's saying they know the secrets of the pyramids or they can predict earthquakes just from looking at the stars, well, I'm going to need a little more than just their word for it, you know?
Totally. And the burden of proof is always on the person making the claim. It's not up to us to disprove them. They need to provide the evidence to support their ideas.
So, as we're wrapping up this deep dive, what would you say is the most important message for our listeners? What's the one thing you really hope they take away from this whole conversation?
I think the key thing is to just be really mindful about the information you're consuming. Don't be afraid to question things, even if it comes from a source you normally trust. Look for evidence. Consider different perspectives. And, be willing to change your mind if you learn something new that challenges your previous beliefs.
That's such a good point. It's easy to fall into that trap of just looking for things that confirm what we already believe.
Mm.
But if we really want to learn and grow, we have to be open to changing our minds.
Right. Exactly. And it's also okay to say, I don't know. Sometimes we don't have all the answers. And that's okay. In fact, I think embracing the unknown can be a really powerful thing. It drives us to keep learning and exploring.
I love that. Embracing the unknown. All right, so to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds working because there's always something new to learn.
And remember, as you're out there exploring all the information the world has to offer, don't forget those critical thinking skills. That's your compass for navigating the sea of information and finding your way back to the truth.
Well said. Until next time, everyone, happy deep diving.